This is a message to all of you on the board for August the 25th, 2015. Earlier today, and some of you may have seen it, I sent a message to our state and tribal delegates. As you know, I try to record messages at least quarterly for them, dealing with issues and concerns that we know are important to both they as our delegates and the members they represent. Today's message dealt a little bit with the issues in Washington as we attempt to get closer to a transportation bill, but it also dealt with our work with Enterprise, where we're looking forward to expanding the resources that provide transportation to our members using van pools. We're very pleased with the progress we've made with Enterprise, and we sent along to the delegates much of the information that we shared with you last week. We're hopeful that we'll have additional projects and additional interest from our delegates as different ways of providing traditional community transportation can be developed using this relationship and this partnership. In addition to our partnership with Enterprise, you may recall that at the Expo this year, we had representation from Toyota Corporation, including the president of Toyota, who came to listen to the presentations dealing with volunteer transportation. I'm very pleased to let you know that on Friday of this week, Charles Dixon will be attending a meeting in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with Toyota that will finalize an agreement which will provide a support from them for the Volunteer Transportation Center. We expect that there will be a gift of approximately $250,000 to further the efforts of the Volunteer Transportation Center, as well as 2 vehicles that we can use as awards. One between now, I believe, in the end of the year, and one at Expo next year for outstanding performance in this field. These are great outcomes with working with private sector partners. And Charlie and, of course, Helen Kirshner have done just great work with Toyota. And Karen Souza, with some help from Bob Carlson, has done tremendous effort and tremendous work with Enterprise, both of which represent new resources that we can try to use to assist our members. In a similar way, as you know, this week the Federal Transit Administration sent around a Federal Register notice dealing with safety again. It seems to be quite the unusual notice because it really does address the fact that there are additional components that have to be developed before they can implement a safety program for transit. One of these deals with a national safety plan, and one of them deals with their regulations concerning asset management. We're not exactly sure when this is supposed to be done, but we have been told soon. The Federal Register notice contained a great deal of discussion of the shortfalls and failings of Washington Metro, as well as a couple other large transit systems, but no examples of problems with buses or traditionally bus-driven transit or small transit agencies. So we're interested to see how this develops. In the meantime, in about 30 days, we'll be issuing something similar to what we did in the van pool area concerning our safety certification programs linked to our insurance coverage. It's time for us to continue to make our case that good safety and risk practices, as outlined in our certified program, provide strong incentives for insurance companies to provide coverage at much better rates. There's a direct relationship between good safety and lowering liability costs, which we think is a good idea to highlight now, and to also suggest that community and public transit agencies should be better prepared for regulations by having people certified who understand the basics of risk management and the basics that are involved in maintaining good safety programs. From what we understand and what we understand from our continuous discussions from the FTA, We think those will be valuable insights. So we're going to be delivering a message to our members to be better prepared for when those regulations show up by making the kind of time and efforts now so that you don't have to catch up or do so much later. I think that we need to try to get ahead of some of these issues as we know they're coming, and certainly the safety and the insurance connection can be very helpful. This is also a very busy time here. As you know, the Congress and the congressional session has bounced around continuously for the last several months. As you know from reading our website and some of the other information we've sent you, there has been some progress in the House and some progress in the Senate on the transportation bill that we think could have good results, but we remain very guarded in our outcomes and hopes for that legislation for two reasons. One, between now and the end of October, when the extension for the transit legislation runs out, we have a number of major political issues that will be occurring when Congress comes back in September. Not only do they have to vote on this Iranian situation, but every appropriations bill and authorization due this year needs to be completed by September 30th. And if you haven't been following it, we have another debt ceiling issue to raise, and Congress will have to extend the debt ceiling again by the end of September, or allow the United States to face another financial default. In light of the events of the last week with the economy in general and the situation on foreign exchanges and the stock market, I find it I find it outrageous that Congress would inflict any more uncertainty in the economy. But this is a political year, and this has been a very divisive partisan issue over the last 2 years. So all of these events could collide in a way that make it very difficult for us to get the kind of attention that we need on a transportation bill. So I would advise you to stay tuned for that. And in the time between now and when Congress comes back, if you have an opportunity to speak to your member, I hope that you'll raise these issues and concerns. Speaking of talking to members, we did have our first National SUN meeting, Small Urban Network meeting, 2 weeks ago in Denver. We had excellent turnout, and one of the activities at that conference was to set aside time where the delegates who attended could in fact take time to go and call their congressman or their congressman's office to touch base on the transportation legislation that was just concluded in the Senate and the information that we understood about the House so that they could convey to their members the importance they have in the outcome of transportation legislation. I think that it's also important, and particularly with the small urban members, that we address some members of the Republican Party who seem to continue to insist that there is no public transit in their community, even though they have a small urban system or a rural one. This has become kind of a typical excuse to assume that only people in New York and large cities benefit from transit, so we don't have to do anything in that regard. I think we've been very good at confronting that over the last year, and I hope that we can put that issue to rest this year once and for all. But I am very pleased that the people who attended our small urban meeting stepped right up to the plate and were willing to make those contacts during the critical period 2 weeks ago. In addition to saying something about Enterprise and Toyota, I also want to mention that we were very happy that Route Match, another private sector transportation supporter, sponsored our conference for small urban transit organizations and provided the hotel meeting spaces and the meals as part of their contribution, so that we were able to do this kind of introductory, kind of a recruitment meeting for small urban members that required no registration fees or expenses for meals. I think that helped increase our turnout to almost 100 transit systems. And I think we want to try this one more year next year, but providing that open, no registration fee for people who are members of our association. I think many of the small urban people went out of their way to tell us how pleased they were about our advocacy for more bus money, how pleased they were about our advocacy for flexibility, and how much they appreciated our efforts to get Congress to look at a national perspective on transportation that included them as well as their regional and their rural neighbors. So I think we're all very appreciative of that. Scott Bogren and Rich Sampson, in particular in our office, really spent a great deal of time organizing this effort. I think they both are held in high regard by the small urban members, and we were very pleased with what they had to say about the quality of work of our association and the support that we've been able to provide. So I look forward to continuing to enhance those relationships in the next 6 months in a way that will make them long-term supporters of the Community Transportation Association. Additionally, here in Washington last week, we had our first visit from CTAA's audit team, who have begun the process of completing our annual audit. And as you know, our goal is to get that out sooner than last year, and Mr. Browner reports that that process is already underway. They were only here for 3 initial days, and then they disappeared, and some of us, me in particular, had high hopes they wouldn't come back, but they are definitely coming back to finish their work, hopefully again on time. Shortly, here at the office, we'll also be engaging in a series of renovations that begin in September and October. As some of you may remember, I and Donald were able to renegotiate our lease agreement here in Washington, D.C., so that for the next 12 months, CTAA will be rent-free here in Washington, D.C. By being rent-free, we lower our administrative cost and we lower our operating costs significantly. In addition to the deal giving us a year of free rent, we also negotiated renovation cost of pretty close to $1 million, which will allow us to renovate our side of the floor for our own use and create an incubator on the other side of our floor that will allow us to sublease space to other organizations or businesses that will provide us with not only revenue, but also a means of lowering our long-term cost. Many people at CTAA, as you know, are either on the road or can work in a teleworking environment, and by doing so, we will lower our operating cost and increase our revenue. So we're very glad that this process has begun and will make the association more financially viable in the short and long term. So there will be a great deal of activity this fall. As you know, the board committee in charge of looking for a replacement has extended the deadline for until September 15th. I'm sure you've all seen that. We have used an online system for the applications. So far, I believe there's pretty close to a dozen applications that have been received, all of them within that electronic format, which should make the process a little bit simpler for the board as we go forward. It's an example of how many things that we do now electronically, and how we'll continue to do that in the immediate future. So those are pretty much most of the things that are going on around here at the moment. I look forward to hearing from you as needed. I think you'll be very surprised by the time we get to Rochester. Perhaps we'll know more about what the legislative outcome will be, Or we could all be wondering what we're going to do because Congress can't pass any appropriations bills. So by the time we get there, we should have some answers or some fairly good ideas about the way some of these things are progressing. So until then, please give me a call or send me a message for anything that's on your mind that we need to know. I hope that you will follow up with some of the delegates yourself about our recent sending on the subject of the enterprise relationship. And I think we'll have several other things like that shortly that we can report on. So that plus my delegate message is more than enough for you to absorb today. So thanks for all your help. Look forward to seeing you soon. And goodbye for now. And see you later.